January 20th, a couple of days before actually Silas was born, was actually Aaron's birthday, and I happened to be catching a flight to go to St. Louis, Missouri. And while I was there, Aaron kept joking that I'm gonna have the baby while you're gone. But before we had left, we had already decided like it was a good time to leave. That she didn't feel anything, and honestly, even before everything had happened, we had kind of been at this weird stage where, because of what happened to us about 2 years prior, of us losing Benjamin, we had kind of waited till about 7.5 months into the pregnancy that we started doing the celebrations, when we started doing all the parties, when we started doing all the things to kind of celebrate Silas's coming. And now we're at a point where I felt like we were comfortable that I could leave, and I left, and then all of a sudden she's saying, hi, she kind of feels weird, she kind of feels different. Well, January 22nd, that morning, I remember waking up and she says, I feel like I'm gonna have him today. And I remember joking back to her saying, yeah, like, just wait, you can wait a little bit longer because I'll be home. By the end of that night, I was gonna be home. While I'm teaching, all of a sudden I get a text message that I'm starting to feel pain. I think he's gonna be here today. Again, I joke like, no, that's not gonna happen. And then she says the next text message, I'm going to the hospital now.
So that day, for me, actually started around 4 a.m. I woke up normally to go to the restroom, and I felt somewhat of cramps. I went back to bed. I woke up again around 8 a.m., still feeling the same thing, cramps, but there was nothing like painful, there was nothing consistent. You know, there was a few things that hadn't happened yet, so I didn't believe that I was in labor. Everybody was at church, you know, it was just me and Elijah at the house, and I was texting Joseph, like, I think the baby's gonna come today or at least tomorrow for sure. So I kept experiencing them, but like I said, like no pain, no nothing. I got up again to go to the restroom, and from that point, I think is when everything shifted. Like I felt like this, from like feeling like a mild slight cramp to like the next second was like instant pain, and I was like, okay, like something's going on. Probably another 10 minutes passed by, and that's when everything just like, from there on, I knew I was in full-blown labor because like they were consistent, they were a couple seconds apart. So I started texting Joseph, all right, like I think this is happening, I think we need to go to the hospital. So I texted my mom, she was at church, and I said, we need to go to the hospital. And from the 5 to 7 minutes it took to get from my house to the church, she was on her way. Like that's when everything shifted. Like it went from like maybe a 10, like the pain was tolerable, but it went from like a 10 to 100. And during that time, like I felt so much pressure. Me and myself was trying to like hold my body together, but I just felt like everything was like, Silas was just coming out. My water had broke and everything had came out. Luckily, like Isaiah was there that day too, and he woke up and he was like, what can I do? And I was like, just call 911. There's nothing I could do. I was like laying down. I was like, I can't get up. We lived in a 2-story house. I couldn't go downstairs. I was like, I just can't do nothing. Just call 911. I don't know what to do.
I didn't even know I slept in. I wake up and I have like missed calls, missed texts, and I'm looking at my phone like, crap, I slept in, like darn it. And then a group me, our family group me, a message pops up, and Joe was like, hey guys, Erin's heading on her way to the hospital. She's in a lot of pain, just do whatever you can to help her. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm like starting to wake up, and then I hear like this intense screaming, and I'm like, she's not on the way to her hospital. And so I kind of freak out. I realize, wait, it's like a lot later than I thought. And then I heard another really, really loud scream, and I'm like, oh, the crap. I knew in my gut, like I could feel like something wasn't right. And so I jump up on my bed. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, what do I do? And so I throw on some clothes, and I run into her room, and I'm like, you know, what's going on? What can I do or whatever? She was telling me she just needed her mom. And I was like, well, in my head, I'm like, well, I can't do anything about that. So the first thing I do is like, well, I don't want Elijah to freak out because that would be worse. We don't need 3 people freaking out. So I grab him and I take him downstairs and I put some like movie or TV or whatever on so that he can watch it. And then I go, I run back upstairs and check on her. So at that moment, like she wasn't like crazy freaking out. She had somebody there on the phone with. So I ran into my room, threw on a shirt, called Xavier, and I'm in the closet like, bro, what do I do? Like, what the heck do? I don't know what to do. Because I'm trying to think of like the worst case scenario is I'm gonna have to deliver a baby, and I'm like, I'm not ready for that. Like, we're friends, but we're not like that kind of friends. And so he's like, oh, we're heading over there right now. Just be with her and stuff, and just comfort her. So I'm like, okay. I hear Elijah like outside of Pat's room, so I run downstairs. I put him back in. I get him food or whatever, so he stays there, and I tell him to wait. He's asking like a million questions. He still asks a million questions. But I run into the bathroom. I'm just like I can feel myself having a panic attack. So I like stare at the mirror, and I'm like, all right, you gotta do this. You gotta do this. You gotta do it or whatever. So I'm like, all right, I got this. So I ran upstairs and I'm like, what else can I do? And then she's starting to freak out because it was the pains were getting worse and worse. And so I just sat on the bed next to her and I'm just trying to tell her it's okay. And then she was still on the phone with Pat, so I grabbed the phone from her, and I'm just like asking her, like, what else do I do? And at that time she was squeezing my arm and biting it, and I was like, okay, do whatever you got to do. Like, I just don't need you like dying or freaking out or whatever. She was like, you need to call 911. And at this point I'm like, why haven't I even thought of that? So I put her phone down, I grabbed my phone, and I called 911, and they were asking me a bunch of questions, and I know like none of the answers. They were like, how far are the contractions? And I'm like, I have no idea. So I turned to Erin, and she's like in tears, and I'm like, how far are your contractions? And she's like, they're really close. And I'm like, she says they're really close. And they were like, how far along is she? And I'm like, how far along pregnant are you? She's like, a lot. And I'm like, she says a lot. I'm like giving them no specifics, and I was probably the worst person to like give them information. So I gave them the address. They stay on the phone with me. They're like asking me like, is she crowning? I'm like, are you crowning? Because I'm not checking. Like, I don't know what's going on here. And Pat just had a total knee surgery, and somehow like I hear the door open and she's already up the stairs. And literally at the same moment she's coming up the stairs, Elijah was behind her, and I think that's when the baby started coming out, and she went in there just in time to catch the baby. And that's when like I just remember Erin like looking at me like, get out of the room. And I'm like, oh yep, no argument there, like, no worries. So I literally grab Elijah because he's like, Mommy, what's going on? And I just grab him, pick him up, and run downstairs.
My mom got there, and by the time like she walked in the door is when she got the phone. Like, it was probably like 30 to 40 seconds. She got the phone, and the operator like told her like 2 or 3 steps, and Silas was out. Like, it was just one like massive push that my body like just pushed him out, and he was here. As soon as like he came into her arms, the paramedics walked through. They were surprisingly, they seemed confused because they didn't know what, it seemed like they didn't know what to do. Like, they were surprised like this was happening. Just the look on their face was like, okay, like they weren't lying. Like, I think they expected to come in and like take a pregnant person to the hospital. By the time they got there was a baby. And so what happened is that they came in, they took Silas, they started CPR, they started oxygen because he came out and he wasn't crying, he wasn't moving, he looked blue. So they started CPR, they were giving him oxygen, and at this point, like, Joseph's trying to call everybody, and I call him. My mom's trying to explain what happened, and like she's so lost over it. She's just like, he's here. Like, he came out, she's here, but we're still at the house.
I'm sitting on the couch when I see another ambulance arrive. They bring in the stretcher. That's when I see them take down Silas, and I just remember catching a glimpse of him, and he was like pale. He wasn't like, he just looked lifeless, and he didn't look like he was okay. And I was like, at that moment I was shocked. I was just like, in that moment I was like, crap, again? And then they rushed him to the hospital. A few minutes later, I see my sister come down, my mom, and my mom's telling me like, we're gonna take Aaron to the hospital. She's in the next ambulance. She's right behind Silas. And then they leave. And then before me and Xavier head out to the hospital, I walked upstairs and I looked in her bedroom, and there was blood all over her sheets. And I was like, we need to clean her. We need to clean her room so when she comes back, it's clean. And I remember I like cleaning supplies. I was like scrubbing the floor. I was scrubbing the blood out of the floor. I was so intensely doing it, and I told Xavier, I was like, go start the washing machine. We're gonna make sure she has a fresh bed to come home to. And I was like, they're gonna come home and they're gonna want a fresh bed to sleep in. Her and Silas, and I just kept thinking that over my mind. I was like, her and Silas need a fresh bed to come home to, and that just kept like replaying in my mind. I was just trying to like not think about the other possibilities.
I tell the people that I'm with. I remember telling the church, and the church right away found another flight for me. We were in the green room, I remember, and they just began to pray for me, and it was a really great moment for me because I'm just trying to figure out what to do, and I'm kind of freaking out. So it was really great. I'm so grateful for them for that moment, and I remember the youth pastor at the time. He ends up taking me. I felt so bad for him because there's nothing he could say, there's nothing he could do except for try to get me to the airport as fast as he could. Finally get a flight, and I'm texting people, I'm calling people, what's new, what's information that's happening, and little by little there's more stuff happening where I'm getting information like on the way to the hospital that Silas died of cardiac arrest, and now they're possibly being able to resuscitate him, and finding all this stuff that's happening, that there's complications, and they don't know what they're going to do, they don't know what the problems are, and finally, I get to the airport, and there happens to be crazy things that are happening all around the United States. There's tornadoes happening in Oklahoma, and there's tornadoes even happening in Miami at that time. So there's no flights taking off to that point. So all of a sudden, the flight that I did have that was earlier now gets delayed. And I'm just, again, freaking out. I don't know what to do. Again, I'm starting to scramble, trying to find any way. How can I get to Miami without all this stuff that's going on? What do I do? And I'm still texting people, and I'm trying to do my best to find out information, what's happening, what's an update, where's Silas at, is he okay, is he alive, what do I do? Finally, I get on the plane, and for everyone that knows me, they know I'm one of the cheapest people ever, and I buy the plan so that I can have internet, so I can start texting, and I'm texting like crazy. I'm just trying to get all the information, and all of a sudden, in the halfway through the flight, I get a text message that said, hey, they kicked us all out of the room, and they let Erin know that she's actually, her kidneys are failing and she's going on dialysis. And at this moment, I'm in the middle of the plane. I'm like trying not to freak out. I'm trying not to like cry my eyes out because I feel like this is like, I'm losing my son, I'm losing my wife. Like, I'm going through all these stories in my head, like 1,000 stories hit me of, how do I raise Elijah by myself? What do I do? What's art? Like, how do we do this? How do we continue on? I'm looking at every perspective, figuring out what can happen. And I feel like if there's this crazy moment, it's crazy, like this storm that's happening inside of me. And all of a sudden, I just remembered, I put my head down, and I feel like God kind of has this moment with me where I felt like I was reminded of my past. And I'm looking at my future, and it doesn't look so good. And it just this moment where I remember God kind of brings the story of Moses up to me, where he shows me where Moses is looking behind him, and this past is behind him. It's chasing after him, and they're trying to kill him. His past is trying to kill him. And then he's looking forward, and there's no way he's going to get out of this. And all Moses does is lift up his rod. And I'm like, I put on worship music. I just remember just sitting there, and I'm just like, as much as I can, control myself of worshiping God. And I'm like, okay, God, you got Moses out. You're going to get me out. I can do this. So I remember I'm texting everybody. Finally, I text Xavier, and I'm like, hey, you need to make sure you're at the airport. As soon as I land, I'm getting off this plane. I'm going to the hospital. We're going to figure it out. And finally, like, I get out of the airplane, and I remember it's like one of those moments where like everyone stands up and I'm like, I want to bulldoze through everybody and just like fight people to get to the airport. I felt like it was like this movie, this unrealistic movie that was happening in my life, where all of a sudden I'm running down the airport, I'm finally get to the car, Xavier pulls up, we take off. I just remember like he probably broke about 20 laws on the way to the hospital, no joke. We pull up, he takes me to the front, I jump out, I'm trying to get through the security, we get my name badge, get in there, I run to where she's at, and I just remember like seeing my wife. She didn't look like anything was wrong, but I remember seeing her, I'm just like, it was just like this weight that dropped off me. I couldn't stop crying. I remember just holding her, hugging her, and holding her super tight. I think I probably ran past like all the friends and people that had showed up at the hospital, all the people that showed up there, and I remember just running there because I was just like, I want to see her, I want to make sure she's okay. And then we're sitting there, and all of a sudden while we're sitting there, the doctor comes in and says again, I'm sorry, your wife, her kidneys don't look good. Tomorrow morning we're gonna re-evaluate some things, but it looks like she's gonna be going on dialysis.
Joseph finally gets there. He comes in, and it was a relief to me, and you could just see it in his face. It was a relief for him to finally be there, to be close. So he gets there, and then he checks on me. You know, we go over like just pretty much everything that happened, everything that up to that moment, you know, what was going on and what went wrong. And then he goes and sees Silas.
At the hospital we were at, they had iPads, so we were doing our best to try to get a video of the iPad to Aaron, and they were having trouble with that. And finally we even said like, we can use our phones, like if that's what it takes, whatever it takes, because we want her to see Silas. And I remember the first couple minutes, like I was just sitting there and I'm like crying by myself, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let her see me crying. I'm gonna get it all out now, and then once we get the iPad, I can be happy and be like, look at our baby. And I just, because I remember walking in there and seeing he's just there. And in the very beginning, they had to put him on a cooling blanket to be able to kind of put him on a a coma almost state, where his body and organs wouldn't be pumping so fast and moving so fast. So I just remember him sitting there, and he was just so lifeless. And they're like, you can touch him, you can. And I was just so scared. I didn't know what to do. Finally, they got the iPad to work, and I was able to show Aaron like, this is our baby, and we sat there, and I remember going back, and that's when they had told me the news that like the possibility at that point was that he wasn't going to make it out of the hospital, and he was either going to be dead or brain dead.
There was a neurologist who told us you're going to just need to go home and pray for a miracle, because we didn't think he was going to make it through the night. So there was a lot of heavy news for us, for me and my family, and my son-in-law, even Elijah. You know, he had no clue what was going on, other than grandma's going nuts and everybody's just like, but you know. So for that little boy, he was not understanding everything. But when we got all that news and stuff, I was able to go home, and the house was empty. And I was able to go home, and I pretty much had a breakdown with God. Got into my room, and I was angry, sad, hurt, scared, and I pretty much just started yelling at God, like, what is going on here? You know, this is not what you do. This is not how things are supposed to go. And I challenged the Lord, because of, mind you, I'm praying and yelling in my room and crying, and I said, you know, I challenged the Lord, and I told him, I said, you know, this is not supposed to be happening, because you said in your word that, you know, you would heal the sick and make the blind to see and the lame to walk and the deaf to hear, and you even raised the dead. So I'm asking you to do something with my daughter and my grandson. I need to see the miracle you performed, the miracles you were performing in the Bible days. I need to see them now. And I was just yelling at God, you know, show me. And just, you know, but I just released everything I had and finally calmed down. But I was really I asked the Lord, you need to show me, God, that there is a miracle, that you can do miracles. And I put it in the Lord's hands, and slowly I was able to go to sleep that night, just kind of with a reassurance that, you know what, God, you got this, and I know you're going to do this. And going back to the hospital the next day, Aaron was doing a little better, but Silas was still in his little induced coma. But after that, I just never gave up the faith, and never gave up, believing God was going to do what he said in his word he would do.
Finally, I think it was about the next day, finally we were able to kind of get her to go out and see the baby. I think it might have been that night actually, and she goes out, and we were able to wheel her all the way to the place. And I remember when we first got there, we were excited because we get to scrub in, and it was one of those Grey's Anatomy moments of scrubbing in for the first time, and you use the soap and do all this stuff, and then finally we ended up going in there, and we meet some of the nurses and just get to talk to them. And then finally the next day is when we finally started getting some good news, and that was that Aaron was getting better. And they said that through everything that has happened, basically, that it was kind of all going downhill. Everything, her kidneys were getting worse, everything was getting bad, and finally the next day was all right, it looks like there's a small improvement, and that small improvement was a huge hope for us, and it was a big deal. So we celebrated that, and again just kind of sat there. And I remember every night people coming in and just trying to encourage us, and people sending text messages to us, people just all around trying to do their best. And I mean, the things that meant the most to us at the time was just the people that showed up, the people that were there with us, and they didn't have to say anything, they didn't have to give us 200 scriptures on how everything was going to be okay. Sometimes it was just being there and just spending that time together, and just and then sometimes it was just us. I remember we just sat there and we just listened to music and just listen to worship music, and then sometimes it was just trying to watch TV together and enjoy time together, because we just didn't know what kind of time we had left, if we had time left, and what that looked like. So I just remember trying to figure out asking questions that I just never knew about her, whether it was some food that she liked or different things that she liked. What was this something that was significant that mattered to her, and just trying to figure out I didn't want to miss a moment, I didn't want to miss a time that maybe I would not see her again. So I asked a bunch of questions, and then finally, again, they could tell her she's getting a lot better. Her kidneys are 100%, and it was about another day or two that we should be getting out. And we're how do we go from it's going to be all over, it's no hope, and now we're seeing okay, she's going to be going home soon. So finally we ended up going home, and that was one of the hardest days ever, because we've been in that situation before where Aaron's going home and we're going home and we have no baby, and it was hard leaving. It was almost this weird feeling that when we're there, at least we know we're there and the baby's there. But when we went home and came home empty-handed, we were just what do we do now? Because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what tonight's going to bring. And I remember the first night being home, I was just up all night. I couldn't go to sleep. I was so tired, but I couldn't go to sleep because what if we got a call? What if something happened? What if what if the nurse finally calls us and tells us your baby didn't make it through the night?
Sometimes too, in those moments, you always got a lot of, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And for the people that were not as close to us, I guess, it was always we're doing good. But I remember in that moment, I told Joe, I said, if God is all knowing, and if God is, he knew this was gonna happen, knowing we've already been through this, why would he give us Silas? Why would he why would he bring us all the way to the end? We were 2 weeks away. I had absolutely no problems through the whole pregnancy. Everything was perfect. I think I had to do my glucose test twice, but even that was perfect. And I was like, why would he bring us to the finish line just to like take him away? And I didn't like understand. And I think a part of it, like I didn't want to understand. Like I knew how I felt, and I was right and God was wrong. And I didn't want to accept it. But I used to like one of like my best friends at the time, I would always tell her, like, I said, Jewel, I don't understand. Like, and she was like, I would tell her, I don't understand why God would give us Silas and take him away like this. And I used to tell her all the time, I was like, she's like, you just have to believe and you have to trust. Like, she would like try to put all this positivity in me, but I was like, I don't want to trust him. And then if something happens, like I'm gonna say, like I'm gonna be mad at God. Like I trusted you with everything, and you still didn't come through. So I was like, I'm just not gonna trust him. I'm just gonna be here. I'm gonna and see what happens.
Even doing ministry at the same time, where like you have this time where you're struggling through doubts, you're struggling through frustration, you're having these arguments with God, and yet at the same time, like there's this moments of just like, okay, now I'm going out there and I'm going to have to preach a message of faith to people, and I'm struggling with this faith, and I think those were times when God was just really like reestablishing faith, where it was like it wasn't a normal faith. It wasn't a faith that was fake. It wasn't a faith that like you could fake. It was literally just something that was built up inside that says like, I don't have any more. There's nothing else left, and God, like I am solely dependent on you. I like have no energy left. I have no capacity left. I have nothing left to give, and it was like these dependable moments that built this like strong intimacy with God that was just strange. Sunday night is when this all happens. Then next week on Monday, she's showing up to work, and we're going to work, and part of it was because we knew that we were going to see like $30,000 worth of bills coming in, and we couldn't afford it, and she's just trucking through and kind of just like, man, we're gonna make it. We're gonna go through this, and we're gonna do this together, and it was just the craziest season for us, because I remember we were leading teams of volunteers, and sometimes we'd have some trainings, and if that meant that night we were going to have a training, that meant that night we weren't going to see our baby, because he was in NICU and we wouldn't have the chance. So there was tons of nights where we just weren't able to see him, and I just remember like feeling so guilty, every night that we could not see him. And there's just different stories that people kept telling us as that happened. People would tell us their stories of things that happened in their life and how their child went through the same situation, the same circumstance, and it kind of just gave us a little bit more hope.
We were coming home one night. It was weeks into, our new norm. Like we would wake up in the morning, take Elijah to school, and then it's like 8:30 at this time. I would go to the hospital for 4 or 5 hours, go to work, come home, do the mom job, clean the house, cook, clean, get Elijah homework and ready for bed, and then we would take off around 9:30 if we were lucky to the hospital, spend a few hours, and then make it back by 12, and then just to do it all over again. And I remember one night coming home, and I was like, remember when I was telling you, like, God, why me? Like, why us? And I told him, I was like, I just had this thought I told him, like, I would picture it being someone else that was completely faithless and just, like, devastating them to the point of, like, no return. And I felt like the only thing that helps us along the journey is that we do have the faith for it.
And I think, like, there was, like, inside of that, there was even more moments when we're inside the NICU and there's other babies there, other parents there. And you watch TV shows, you watch movies, and you hear certain language that means certain things. So all of a sudden, I remember there was like all these nurses rushed into one station, one area. They're like starting to put up all these like blocks so you can't see anybody else or anything else was going on, and you hear like them like say things like he's coding and things like that, and you're like, oh my goodness, like there's this baby that's over there and they're going through this hard time, they're going through this thing, and then all of a sudden I just remember hearing like the so many loud noises until all of a sudden all you hear is a time being like yelled out, and you just knew like they were saying at that point like that was the time of death. And like I remember sitting there and thinking like, that could be us. Like that could be just as much. And any time, any moment, that could be us. We could be getting that phone call. The parents weren't there at that time, and one of them would have to deliver that phone call to somebody. And so many times I remember asking the nurses, like, how do you guys do this? How do you guys do this? And yet, like, there were so many times where the nurses were like, how do you guys do this? And we were sitting there like, man, like, if it wasn't for God, it would be like, we wouldn't be able to sit here. We wouldn't be able to do this. Like, there's no way we could do this without him. There was a doctor I remember we kept trying to avoid. Like, every time we talked to this doctor, they would always come back with something negative, like, no matter what. It was just like never anything hopeful. There's the same doctor, the first doctor came into us and said he's gonna either end up brain dead or dead. So we were like trying to avoid them. Like, they would always be like, oh, do you want any updates from the doctor? And we would look to see who the doctor was, and if it was her, it would be like, no, we're good, we're okay, we don't want to hear anything from her. And then if there was a couple of them that were just like, if they obviously couldn't tell us anything good, but they would tell us whatever good there could be. So 2 weeks later, after they finally take him off of the cooling blanket, was the biggest day of like this whole experience, because at that moment, if it did not work out, then and his just organs started acting up, and all of a sudden he started normal. There's a possibility that he could die. And again, it was just another moment of just like, okay, what do we do now? We're just sitting here. We're gonna wait and see. And I remember sitting there throughout when they took him off. We went and we just sat there. We had our Fridays. We'd be off, and we would just be there all day at the hospital, just like waiting and talking to him and dreaming about what could be and what happened and all this different stuff. And we took him off, and he was doing okay. He just didn't move still. He was still there, and just sat there. So we would go in day after day and week after week. And one of the biggest encouragements during that time was we ended up finding a book from Chad Veach, and it was called Unreasonable Hope. And we started reading it on the way to the hospital, back and forth. And just that would help us a little bit just to get us through one more day, because if someone else went through it, then it was okay for us at least. And so we would go in there and we'd read, and then we'd walk in there, and we just sometimes sing worship songs, because we had this playlist of worship music that we were listening to, that we were just like praying through and listening to this of God of miracles and just all this crazy stuff that we were trying to listen to encourage ourselves. And then we'd go in there, and the first couple of weeks was just like, God, just show us one thing. Like, if you could just show us one thing, I'll be happy. And I remember, like, the first thing was like his little toe would move, and the mean doctor, I don't know a better name to call her, but the mean doctor was like, oh, that's just a reaction, that's nothing big, don't think anything big of it. And then finally, like, it was like maybe the third or fourth week came, and she came to us, and we didn't want her to give us any information, but she came to us, and she ends up going to him, and she ended up pinching his heel to show us that he's not reacting. She goes, look, see, there's nothing that's changed. He's still the same place. He's not moving. We're not seeing any hope, or nothing changes. And she pinches his toe, and all of a sudden she looks at us, and out of the corner of her eye, you can see his foot move. And he moves his heel, and she's so surprised. She's so shocked. She didn't know what to do. And then she starts pressing on his stomach, and he starts squirming. And all of a sudden, there was just like hope. For once, there was hope that something was good was going to come out of it. And I just remember that day we just went home, and we were like super excited. We were like, it wasn't anything big, but it was huge for us. And so we're just like super excited. God, you did something. You did it. Thank you so much for that one miracle, that one thing. And every week it'd be one more week of one more miracle. And it would be like a little toe, and then from a toe to his heels, to his heels, from his leg to his legs, to his arm, to his fingers, to his hands, to his arms, to his body. And then he'd start moving around his head, but his eyes would be closed. And we keep praying. And just all around, there were so many people that ended up supporting us during this time in prayers. I remember one time going on Facebook, and we're like researching through Facebook and just looking through it, and all of a sudden there's this like church that says hashtag pray for Silas. And I'm like, and it even says hashtag no ordinary child, that we started putting out there because of a verse that we found about Moses, talking about how he was no ordinary child. And I look at it and I click on it. I'm like, there's no way this is about Silas. Like, I don't even know these people. What's going on? And there's a church service, and they're literally, before the church service, they're praying. And we're like, who are these people? And I'm like, at first I'm like, there's no way it's our son. And then they're like, and we're just praying for his mom, and we're just, that she would get fully healed because she had kidney failure. And we're just praying that he has activity in his brain, and you know the neurons, and you know everything. And we're like, oh my gosh, like there's people that don't even know us that are praying, and churches all around that are praying, and people that are like lifting him up. And we start trying to do some updates like through social media so that people can know like what's going on day by day, what's happening, and trying to give them information as much as possible. But it was just so amazing to see, like, one, where all of a sudden we're at this point where there's no hope, there's no chance, there's nothing's gonna happen, and all of a sudden there's this slow movement of here's this happens, he moves his hand, he moves his foot, he moves his head, and then all of a sudden the best day of mine, like the entire experience, was when he opened his eyes. I was like so excited. He opened his eyes, he was looking at us, we got to hold him, we were holding him. I just remember like so excited to hold him. I was like so super cautious. I didn't know what to do, and I held Elijah forever, but now I'm holding my baby who's just such a miracle baby.
When the first day, like, we went to pick up Silas from the hospital, it was a really big moment for us because Elijah has never seen Silas. He just knew that we had Silas, and Silas was at the doctor. And that was, for Elijah at least, this is what's supposed to happen when mom has a baby. Like, they stay at the doctor's and they stay there for a while. He never knew, and a part of it, we never told him everything that was going on with Silas. We just said that, Silas needs to stay at the doctor's for a little bit, and that seemed to be okay with him. So the day when we were able to finally bring him home, I thought it was just, normally sometimes when we surprise Elijah, it's just kind of like he gives us a smile and oh, that's cool. But his reaction was just he's real. We weren't lying to him all this time. He was there, and his expression was everything to us.
Baby Silas! Baby Silas! Look, baby. It's a baby.
It's a baby.
As the months kept going, Silas, we just kept noticing this little boy just doing little things that the doctor said he wouldn't do. The neurologist pretty much had spoken to us saying, well, we don't know, he's not going to be able to do anything, move. But then as he started with his movements and his hand gestures, moving his feet, his toes, every little thing, I'd get excited, and I would tell Aaron, look, Aaron, look what he did. And he told us he wasn't going to do that, but look, he's doing it, Just every month was just amazing, even to now, where he smiles and he almost chuckles at us. He recognizes my voice when I come in the room. He'll turn his head. He playing with his little mobile toys. He's grabbing him. Just the fact that he opens his hands and he grabs his toys. I mean, he told us he would never do that.
A lot of the milestones that he's hitting, it just takes us back to those moments that those doctors said, he won't do it, or more than likely he's not going to be able to do it. So
it's been cool to see doctors like neurologists and different people just be so surprised at his constant progression, where they tell us a lot of times, I can't believe he's done this. I can't believe he's been able to develop certain movements where he is holding on to things, his strength to move, his ability to hold up his neck by himself, and just his smiles and different thing where we'll bring him in 1 month, and then the next month we bring him in again, and they're like, he's growing so much, he's developing so many, and they're just in shock of that, and it just amazes us even more because sometimes we're so close in it that we don't see the big picture of everything, and just being able to see that big picture has been incredible, and just seeing the story that God has kind of been putting together that we just never thought, like we talked about earlier, like never thought if this would be anybody else would hate for that to happen to them, but the life of an extraordinary person would kill the ordinary. And I'm just so thankful that, a lot of people, they say they like the rain until it starts raining and everyone starts running into their buildings, running into houses, running into churches, running everywhere. They're like, oh, I love the rain, I love the rain. And the truth is, they don't like the rain, they like to watch the rain. In the same way, no one likes a miracle. They like to watch a miracle. They don't want to have to live a miracle. And I'm so excited, I'm so happy that I've been able to live this miracle and see it right in front of me every day. See him move, see him grow, see him develop, and just see what God does in his life.
He has just progressed so much. Everything they told us he wasn't going to do, he's doing it and more, and then some. And so it brings joy because, God is still to this day showing us this little boy that shouldn't be in our lives. He's in our lives, and he has defied all the odds they told us. Silas is going to be something great. I honestly believe he has already an amazing testimony, and I believe it's being used now.